All right, ladies. We always have one of these to start, get everybody warmed up, wake you up a little bit, wake me up. I'm up. Anyway, all right. So tonight, just to give you a little preview, we're going to talk about sacred time. All right, last time, sacred space. Now we're in space and time, sacred time. So first of all, in the chat, what does that mean to you? And at the same time, give us an example of one of the ways that Judaism marks time. How do you like that? Jeopardy category, all right? So in the chat, what did I ask you? Okay, what does that mean about sacred time? What do you think that means? And how does Judaism keep track of that? All right.
Sacred time?
Sacred time.
Sacred time. Last time was sacred space. We're going to review that a little bit. Sacred time. Sacred time. And how do you think Judaism kind of shows sacred time? In what way or what example? What do you think? We did sacred space. Okay. We learned brachot. I'm going to review this. Julia's going to review this. But sacred time is the other part of that. Sacred time. What do you think sacred time means, and how does Judaism give us an example of something that Judaism does to show sacred time?
And then you can see how many of the things that you're putting in the chat come up in the class today.
And yell bingo when on your bingo card it says the 5 of them, whatever comes up. No, there is no bingo card.
Whole range of answers in here too.
I love them. They're great.
As Ellen started to say, last time we talked about sacred space, and we learned the blessings that we're going to say before and after our class to mark it as a sacred space. So let's go ahead and start by doing that.
We'll start with.
Okay, so can everybody see that now? Ellen? Can you see the prayer up?
I cannot, no.
Okay, hold on.
It's up, Julia. I see it.
Oh, you see it? Okay.
It's all right, Julia. I have it in front of me anyway.
Okay, right. So I sent handouts too, and you can follow along. But and because of Zoom, I'll say it, and you say it in your own home too. And we'll start.
We want you to really practice it. So say it to yourself now. Do the best you can. Eventually, you'll get the fluency, and it will be second nature to you. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
And you should remember what it means. La'asok has a Hebrew word. It's the infinitive. It's the to. Asok means to, I know you're muted, but to participate, to invest yourself in, to put yourself into Divrei HaTorah. What of the Torah? Divrei? Anybody want to unmute for a second?
Words of Torah.
Words of Torah. What else? Good. There are the meanings. Divrei Torah, words of Torah, Divrei.
Learning.
Mean somebody else?
Study, learning.
It's not exactly learning or studying, but it's what it is that you learn or study. It's the things related to. So things can be broadened out. The ideas of. All right. So thing is a typical. Davar also means thing. So yes, it's the sayings, the words, the things. Okay. We're trying to give you a little bit of the Hebrew that you're going to see in the Siddur as you go through this as well.
And we also talked about how la'asok, that's like, you know, think of it in the English, like soaking it all up. We're going to soak up all of the things in Torah in our study session. So we learned that last month. We also learned matovu, that prayer, and then the ending prayer. We learned about the Kaddish, and in particular, the Kaddish de Rabbanan, the scholars Kaddish, that we will say after the learning. So we will do that at the end of this class. And then we also did the breakout sessions with our ritual objects. We talked about, at least in my group, the prayers that may have been associated with those objects and how those objects define the sacred space too. So today we're going to talk about sacred time and the Jewish calendar. So we always say, oh, the holidays are early this year, the holidays are late this year, they're never on time, because we're used to measuring time by the secular calendar. But the holidays, in fact, are always at the same time, amazingly, according to the Jewish calendar. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So we talk about the passage of time. Time is a natural phenomenon and a human phenomenon. So think about it and put in the chat some ways that we mark time in the natural world. How is time marked in the natural world, in nature? Seasons, sunrise and sunset, the days, right? So days are marked by natural time. What else? The moon changes. So, and what happens with the moon changes? What do we call that?
Lunar.
Lunar. What else? What unit of time do we mark by the moon changes?
Months.
The months, right? And what else? What about with the sun?
Days.
Days. What else?
Nights. Years.
One revolution.
Seasons.
Day.
What do we call that? One revolution.
A year.
One revolution around the
Right.
year.
All those are natural phenomenon. What about human phenomenon? What have we done as humans to mark time?
Birthdays.
Calendars and birthdays.
Birthdays, right? That's one way. What else?
Anniversaries.
Anniversaries. We talked about days and months and years. What's missing?
Weeks.
Weeks.
The week is not a natural phenomenon.
An era,
An era,
Decades.
a century.
things like things we mark on that we imprint on a year, like the fiscal year or a performance review or
Academic year.
academic year, right? All the things are all human based. So we're going to look at all these different categories of time. School year, yard sites too, right?
Holidays.
Holidays. So we're going to start off with all these things. We'll go sort of smallest to biggest, and we're going to start out with daily time, and we have a guest teacher for you tonight. So Ellen, do you want to add anything or before you introduce Debbie?
No, I think if you've been reading what everybody has put in the chat, you can see the great variety of the Jewish kinds of things that we mark time with, as well as the natural, as well as, I'm not going to say man-made, I'm going to say woman-made times here. And certainly, there are all these categories, and we live in this great diversity of these things sort of meshing. And some of them are solar-based on the sun. So some of them are lunar-based. And, never the twain shall meet. Yes, they do. And that's why some of us get very confused. And I have to share, I'm in Arizona, and I forgot that the change in time. So I got on an hour ago and then realized I'm now 2 hours behind you, not 3 hours. So there's a perfect example of time sort of, not working in my favor. And then I set the recording off for this and then got off the computer, shut the recording down. I had to go find the rabbi to get it set again. So time really can kind of change a lot of things, including Zoom calls. So we're hoping you enjoy this. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. And to start off the interesting stuff, we have Debbie Lempert with us tonight. And Debbie is one of the co-chairs. Last time we had Toby Holtzman, the other co-chair. And Debbie is going to talk to us tonight about one of the significant prayers, and you should know which one I'm talking about here, in Judaism, another way that we mark Jewish time. And Debbie?
Hi, everyone. I recognize so many of you from Daily Psalms, so it's interesting to see us at night instead of in the middle of the day. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Shema prayer, which we say 3 times a day. Do you know, can anybody tell us the 3 times during the day that we say the Shema?
Akrit, Musaf, and before you go to bed.
Yes. Morning, when you wake up, when you go to bed, and somewhere in the middle, depending on when you get to it. So before we go into the timing, I wanted to focus us on the Shema prayer. I teach little ones at my synagogue and also kindergarten in our religious school. And I find that it really helps me to understand the meaning of the Shema when I teach it in sign language. I used to teach it in a particular way. And this year, for our holiday experience that I taught, I really sat and watched someone who was really deaf, a video of them actually signing the Shema. And it was very interesting because when they started, we talk about listening, but deaf people can't hear. So for them to say listen when they can't hear wasn't very meaningful. So the way that it was presented is pay attention, because we can hear, but sometimes I know I have teenagers, well, only one left now, the other one's an adult, but there's a difference between listening and hearing and paying attention. So the sign for the beginning, Shema, which is a command, is pay attention. So it's this, if you'll join me, Shema, pay attention. Yisrael is the sign of a beard, although we know that most women rabbis don't have one. Shema Yisrael, pay attention, Jewish people. But it's not just this, then you gather all the people together. So Shema, pay attention, Jewish people. Adonai is the sign like this, because God is all around us. Shema, Yisrael, gather the people. Adonai, God. Adonai, Eloheinu, our God. So it's the same God that's everywhere, but bring it in closer to your body, our God. Adonai, again, is everywhere. Echad. And when I was taught this in another class, that when they put their finger up,
You're muted.
I don't know how I got again. Keeps muting. I don't know.
Okay.
Echad can be one, but it's also unique, because there are other religions that recognize a God, but this is our unique God. So try it with me. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. I just thought that was a nice way to really understand the prayer. So we say the Shema 3 times a day. And so, of course, rabbis and scholars, being rabbis and scholars, they always ask questions. So we turn to the Mishnah, and I know hopefully you were able to watch the video and read. And so the word Mishnah comes from the root, a word Mishnah, shocking, which can mean study by repetition. And it also from the verb shana, which means to study and review. The Mishnah was the first study book of law, and it was written, it's a collection of Jewish oral traditions known as the Oral Torah, the statutes and legal interpretations that were not written down in the 5 books of Moses, the written Torah. And Judah Hanasi, at the beginning of the 3rd century CE, redacted it at a time when really the Jews were looking at the destruction of the Second Temple. And there was this concern that this oral tradition could be forgotten, that if there is a war and people scattered, which we know happened, that what would happen to that oral tradition, like playing telephone, when someone starts with a message and it goes on and on and on, and it changes over time. So they really wanted to make sure that they had a lot of this information codified and written down so it would not be lost. And this is where we turn to get answers to questions about understanding Judaism. And the Mishnah that we were presented with, the very first one, chapter 1 of Barachot, asks a question. Can anyone recall what the main question is about the Shema?
What time?
When do we say it?
When do we say it?
Exactly.
morning.
So
In the morning.
First part in the morning.
first, when is the first time that we say it? Well, what's considered morning?
Well, that was the question.
That was the question. What is morning? So somebody said when it's dawn. I don't know how many of you are up at dawn. It depends what time of year it is. Sometimes where I live, it's dawn at 6:15 in the morning. I'm sorry?
Oh, in the evening.
So they were trying to answer the question, what's considered morning? What's considered evening? So I loved when the Mishnah talks about when Rabbi Gamliel's sons came home after being out at a party and saying, you know, up to what time can we say the Shema? And there are, of course, many, many different people weighing in on many different answers. Was there a particular answer for what is considered morning?
Didn't they say up until 3 hours after the sun rises? Because
Yeah.
that's when the kings who don't have to get up early to tend to the fields would rise.
Yeah.
Wasn't that at least one of them?
Yeah, that was one of them. Were there others?
Yeah, the blue and white light.
Yes. And the green, and there was the green and blue also that you could see.
Right.
Enough light to
When the
distinguish.
green meets blue and the blue meets the white.
And so there were different interpretations. So getting up and saying the Shema, you know, it was led into interpretation. And then, of course, the question came, what's considered night? So I guess—
I was wondering, it seemed we talk about putting a fence around the Torah to make sure we don't do anything that's, we're not supposed to be doing, but it seems like they're doing the opposite here and allowing leniency to make sure that you get it done. This is the best time to do it, but it's okay to do it to this time. Or does that make sense?
I think that, well, obviously the multiplicity of opinion, I think that has to do with the reality of human nature. I mean, maybe the midnight is aspirational and up to dawn is like a reality check,
Nothing good happens after midnight.
Or maybe that it's just that important it gets done. So they have to make it lenient. You have to be lenient enough to allow people to do that mitzvah and that mitzvah. And by being that lenient, I don't see it as curtailing, of limiting it. It basically it's saying how important it is and it needs to get done. You should do it by here, but if you get it done by this, that's okay too. So
Why is it important that it gets done?
the Shema, say the Shema.
Yeah.
Good.
Because
Question.
It's an affirmation. It's a daily reminder and an affirmation.
That God is one, that basically that we have one God, and that's the whole basis of Judaism, that, it's one God. It's our, a lot of other religions have one God, but our God is, we were sort of, we were chosen to, and we're, it's basically when we came out as, God gave us the laws to us after we got out of Mitzrayim, and it's a basis of all our religion, basically, that we have one God.
Debbie, were you going to talk about this at all? At the time, I don't want to jump in. But if you go on and you read the V'ahavta, it says when you lie down and when you rise up, it's you're being commanded to say it in the prayer. So that's why it's important to figure out, what does that mean when you lie down and rise up, so that you can fulfill that commandment.
And that was one of the later interpretations as to how do you say the Shema, if you are lying down, or if you're walking, can you say it when you're walking, and so forth. And she actually addressed some of that in that, in the YouTube. So they went on and on. Also, the numerous opinions, many of these rabbis came from different schools of thought, and there was sort of a competition in some ways. You wanted to promote whatever your particular bias was. Some were more conservative than others, conservative with a small c, and in that way, a lot of it had to do with the location of the particular rabbi, and under whose government they were. So there were a lot of extraneous factors. But I think one of the things that Jill's getting to is there's the necessity, or somebody else was, and I'm sorry if I don't have the right person, the necessity to get it done. It wasn't that the end justifies the means. They were not that loose, but they still knew that there was real necessity for the affirmation, as Jill was saying, as a number of you was saying. And this idea that if you had a consistent time for saying it, then that was very much a marking of time as well. And they were in a situation, they didn't have the watches, they didn't have the calendars, they didn't have the things years and years and years ago, obviously, that we use to get this. And controlling the time in which the Shema was said would be one of the ways that they mark time.
And along with that, I thought that the colors were very consistent with what you just said. I interpreted when the blue meets the white, or the blue meets the green, as basically when there's daylight and you can see where the water meets the sand, or where the sky meets the grass. No matter where you are, when it's morning where you are, it's time to say it. Because I didn't really get any other explanation about the colors.
I think colors will come through as we go through the discussion later. You'll see some of the different charts. They talk about thematic kinds of things, and that's up for interpretation as well. So, okay, Debbie, did you want to go on? We're not trying to steal your thunder here.
No, I just, there's so many opinions, of course, 10 Jews and 20 opinions, but I think it was interesting that the Mishnah shares so many differing opinions, because it really shows you all the different ideas and thoughts that came through, so that in our time, we don't say, well, why was only one opinion or two opinions represented? It shows that they were hearing lots of different opinions, but they also needed to train future teachers on the legal issues. And so you can look back and say, well, here were 5 different opinions of it. And, you always think of Hillel and Shammai, and poor Shammai, his didn't stick as well as Hillel's, but we still talk about them. So, I also, going back to the time when this was codified, I mean, today, sometimes we're faced with anti-Semitism, but certainly not at the time that the Mishnah was written down. I mean, they were fighting for their lives. And so needing to say the Shema 3 times a day just to ground you, to center your Judaism, is something maybe we don't face as much today. So thanks for your listening.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm going to a Shachrit service when they're talking about when you wake up, if you go to Shacharit, would you typically say it when you wake up and then again when you go to Shacharit?
I mean, typically it's said upon rising, and then again, you would say it in Shacharit service if you're there. It's part of the liturgy. And then I know, like, when I lead services in the evening once a week, we also say it again, I believe, in Mincha, and then again in at bedtime. So it ends up, but you know, not all.
Don't you say it at Mariv?
Could be. I mix it up because I do them both together.
You say it at Mariv.
Yeah.
So if you've done it your third time, then I don't think you have to do it again at bedtime, but many people have that. Some people have that ritual.
That's a minimum too. That's a, you know, so there are some people that will have more occasion, you know, different situations come up. And that's discussed later on as well in, you know, various places in the Mishnah, and so on and so forth. So it's never just, you know, one question. The question leads to other questions and leads to other parts of the Mishnah, ultimately the Gemara, and then the whole thing together, Mishnah and Gemara, is the what?
Talmud.
Talmud. So just so that when you hear these terms, you know, there's commentary on the Torah, that's the Mishnah. The commentary or the additional commentary on any of these other things is the Gemara, coming from Gomer, which means to finish. They were both codified and put together as the Talmud. So when you hear Talmud, that's what they are talking about. All right, it's commentary on commentary on commentary. And if you look at a page of Mishnah, you know, and what Debbie was saying with all the various commentary, you've got all kinds of people. You know, you can have many, many kinds of groups of people. You have ones who are doing commentary on a page of Mishnah. So you've got the text in the middle. It's about this big. The page of Mishnah is this big, and it's got little, it's almost like a puzzle. And the whole puzzle makes the rectangle of the page, but your commentary is put in little pieces. And it's very, very interesting because somebody over here says something which seems pretty obscure and doesn't necessarily relate to the original text, but somebody else's commentary is off of the commentary, which is off of the text. So, you know, one page can be pretty extensive and pretty diverse in its meaning and what it has on there. Okay,
So-
Debbie, oh, Julia, sorry.
Just to say, any other questions on daily time? I mean, this was a small example. We also talked about the different services, Shachrit and Mincha and Mariv during the day as a way to break up and define the day. Marlene?
What about like hand washing before meals? I mean, were people trying to have meals regularly, or I guess would depend on their agrarian work schedule, right? During the day?
I think so, but it's, yeah, I mean, that breaks up the day, but it could be, you know, you wash your hands, or like they used to have, you know, dinner was supper, or, I mean, it was, so that varied too, yeah.
And again, it could be culturally as well, wherever they were located, because so many of them were exiled all over the place. And culturally, there were different, and they had to live within the parameters and the rules and the laws of their secular country as well. So you know, you kept your Jewishness. Yes, there were things that were expected of you, but how do you make peace with what's expected of you Jewishly and living in a society that doesn't necessarily want you there? So that's all part of that as well as the agrarian society, you know, and that's a natural kind of situation. Okay. Debbie, anything else? Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So we talked about how weekly time was a function, a human imposed function, but actually in Judaism, our weekly time was set with the creation of the world and Shabbat. So we had, this was one of your handouts, right? You can see that. Does someone want to unmute and read this?
I can.
Okay.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the
Sabina?
heaven and earth were finished and all their array. On the seventh day, God finished the work that he had been doing, and he ceased on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that he had done. Such is the story of heaven and earth when they were created.
Thank you. So does that sound familiar to anyone? And when do we recite this?
Friday night.
Friday night.
Morning at Kiddush.
Every Friday night. It's part of the Friday night Kiddush. And so we live that weekly definition. We mark the Shabbat, the beginning of Shabbat, with candles and Kiddush. So that's kind of defined our week. And a lot of you posted that in the chat, that your sacred time starts with Shabbat and separation. And then on Saturday night with Havdalah, that marks the separation too. The end of Shabbat, the end of Kodesh, the end of the holy sacred part, and the return to the whole, the everyday. And so daily, weekly, Ellen's going to talk about monthly.
Okay, so, you know, it's interesting. The moon has had really a very special fascination for Jews. Jews really like the moon, and we gravitate towards the lunar, okay? So why do you think that's the case? What is there about the moon that makes it pretty easy to tell time?
It's consistent. I mean, you could look at the moon and you know that there's so many days. It's
okay.
A new moon of half, you know, it's halfway, it's a full moon, and it happens month after month.
All right, Lillian, you had your hand up as well. Unmute. We're gonna have to just muting and unmuting yourselves. Thank you.
I was going to say fairly similar, but like when you look at the moon, you can see the differences. So it's a good way to keep track of time.
Okay. Anybody else? Good. Linda? Unmute.
Jewish holidays come around the time of the moon. You know, the full moon is usually on the Jewish holidays.
You know, it's so great with those Jewish months and the Jewish holidays. If you know the dates, there are certain numbers on the month. When during the month do certain things appear? You know, we talk about Purim, we talk about Passover. They are exactly what? A month apart.
A month apart.
They are middle of the month holidays. Okay? Rosh Hashanah is when?
End of the month.
New moon.
Obviously, the new moon, okay? And what does new moon mean? What does the moon look like when we talk about new moon?
A sliver.
It's a sliver, okay? It's only 10 calories. It's a sliver. Okay, I had to say it. It's a sliver. And, you know, it's the least part of the moon that we can see and still know that the moon is there. That's the new moon. And then as the month goes on, what happens to the moon? I know it's basic, but we forget this sometimes. It eats a lot and what?
It waxes and wanes.
It waxes and then it gets thin again and it wanes. So we're watching that, and it's so consistent that the moon is something that we can rely on. And, you know, now I want you to think about the Olympics, okay, whenever it'll be. All right, every 2 years, winter, summer, right? Okay, what happens with the torch? What do they do with that torch? Change, I know. We went from calories to the Olympics. Okay, what happens to the torch?
It keeps
When does the
burning.
torch start out?
So it's over
It starts where?
in Greece.
In Greece, okay? And where does that torch go?
To the site of the Olympics.
To the site of the Olympics. All right, how is that torch transferred?
Relay.
Relay, okay? Somebody runs a fixed distance, gives the torch to another person fixed distance, and they run that torch long distances. Well, in the old days, okay, how could they tell when Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, was starting? What did they do? Anybody?
Shofar blast.
They
Okay,
kept
it might be.
and passed the information on.
They passed that information on in much the same way that the Olympic torch is passed on. Now, they had long distances. And remember, because they were long distances, that sliver appeared different times, okay, a little earlier, all right, than it's in some places than in other places. So it was still an iffy kind of thing as far as when it was, but they made the best guess they could. And there really was a codified group that made the final say as to when Rosh Chodesh would start, or when it really, really was. And that was in Jerusalem. And we talked a little bit about this morning, those of you who were on Pirkei Avot, Psalms. The rabbi was talking about you needed 2 witnesses. And I mean, this is really one Zoom group here, class, spilling into another. You needed 2 witnesses to prove that somebody was thought to be guilty. You had to do that. You had to deal with the testimony of 2 witnesses. So there had to be at least 2 witnesses that would swear to the fact that they had seen the crescent moon. So they would go through these relays and people would have differing opinions. The group that decided this was the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, it's a Greek word, and it really meant they had 70 rabbis that were centered in Jerusalem. You know, it was a pretty fixed number, okay? And they had 70 that really put their minds together and did a lot of this discussion and made a lot of these judgments as to when Rosh Chodesh would really start. And they needed to know when Rosh Chodesh was, because everything else was dependent upon it. When you wanted to deal with Rosh Hashanah, you needed to know you were on Rosh Chodesh, the new moon. When you wanted to deal with Yom Kippur 10 days later, okay, that's another sort of magic number. It's almost, if you think of the month, the 28 days, okay, that it takes actually, I have to give you the statistic on this. The actual revolution, I love this, of the moon around the earth, one revolution, 29 days, 12 hours, okay, 29 and a half. Oh, if it only stopped there, 44 minutes and 3.5 seconds. So that's the actual, they've really found this out. That's the actual time of 1 month. If you look at it really in the most valid way, in the most scientific way, they had to do something. Clearly you can't have 3.5 seconds. You can't deal with 44 minutes, and you certainly can't deal with a half a day, because where would the half a day take you? It would take you in the middle of the day. So we'd be starting new months, you know, in the afternoon, and it's a little too fluid here. You can't do that. We needed fixed kinds of sacred time, because everything else, like a house of cards, okay, domino effect, all the cliches were so dependent upon this. So, you know, they would send those witnesses in, they'd swear up and down to the Sanhedrin, they had seen it, they eventually knew a lot of these people who came in as witnesses. And so that was really important, okay, that they knew who the witnesses were. Now, with all that in mind, we still have to think about the solar calendar. And I mentioned that before, because so many of our holidays are really dependent upon harvests. And one of the things that was not, I don't think it was mentioned in the chat before, was that a marking of time. And we are Jewish and we still mark time off of a harvest. Shavuot is what harvest? What was primarily harvested in Israel around Shavuot?
First fruits.
Fruit. One of the names of Shavuot is Chag HaBikurim. And the Bikurim was the fruit offering that was brought to the temple. It was brought in right around, and it's the month of Sivan, and it was brought into the temple as an offering. Okay, we talked about offerings a little bit in the YouTube when she was talking about the Trumah. And the Trumah was an offering that was brought to the Kohanim, to the priests, the high priest, and so forth. So these offerings were brought in. Chag HaBikurim is one of the names of Shavuot. It is a harvest holiday. Chag HaAsif, the ingathering, is one of the names of Sukkot. Okay? And so Chag HaAviv is one of the names of Passover, the holiday of the spring. So they all relate in some way, you know, the three holidays. We categorize them together and call them the Shalosh Regalim, because these were the three holidays, harvest holidays. Think solar calendar here, all right? That people came in, they walked Rega's leg. So Shalosh Regalim were the three major times where the people came to Jerusalem and brought their harvest offerings. They needed to know when they were going to do this, all right? Sukkot comes in the middle of the month, the 15th. It's right around there, okay? Shavuot was a little different. Shavuot is 50 days after when?
Passover.
Passover. So they needed to know as they were counting off the days. What's in the middle between Pesach and Shavuot? What do we count? We count the Omer. And the Omer was originally what? What does the word Omer mean?
Leaves, sheaths?
It's a measure of wheat.
A measure of wheat,
Okay.
yeah.
It's a measure of wheat. So, you know, we did the best we could with what we had to know time, okay? Sacred time was very important, especially for these offerings that were brought to the temple, okay? The Kohanim, everybody knew this. So this business of the relaying and witnesses was one of the ways that they were doing, but it wasn't always effective. It didn't always work. So roundabout the 400s, I believe it is, CE, and let's go over, what is CE for starters? We need to talk about that. Common era, and that's not, you know, non-Jews call it AD, Anno Domini, the year of their Lord, not ours, okay? So ours is CE, and then what's the parallel of before CE? What do we say? BCE, before the Common Era, and then, you know, it suggests what on the other side of that? BC, okay? Before Christ. Again, not applicable to us. So that's, you know, just start learning these kinds of things also. You should, you know, get a sense of it. That also is a measurement of sacred time, okay? It is Jewishly made. We needed our own set of language to suggest what we were talking about, okay? And it takes Jesus out of the equation. All right. Now, let me see if I can, what else I want to talk to you about.
What's a problem with using the moon as a way to mark the month? What's the problem with that?
The
weather can interfere.
Yeah, well, what if it's cloudy for a week in a row and you don't know when, you can't see the moon, so you don't know when it's coming?
So what did they do?
Right. Good question. Okay. And there's definitely stuff in the Mishnah on that. Okay. What do you do? That's why they eventually had to codify it. And it was codified by Hillel II. So the original, Debbie was talking about Hillel and Shammai. All right. The original Hillel was Hillel. Hillel II was probably some rabbi who was equally as scholarly who came after. And I did not research him, so I don't know exactly, but he was certainly entitled Hillel II. And he codified that in the 4th century CE. So what he needed to do when he codified that was he realized, you know, if we're on a lunar calendar, how many days are you talking about over a year? not 365.
No, no.
No.
Isn't
what are
it
you talking about? Do the
354?
math.
Isn't it 354?
354.
354 and a third. Okay, no, and a third. All right. So what happens is,
Hold on.
how many days are you off each year? 365 minus what?
9 days.
11.
You're about 11 days, 11 and a third, 11 2/3, 11 and a half, whatever. Okay, it's not going to work because what happens after you have 3 years? How many days are you off?
A month.
A whole month.
32,
Because you have to have
33.
Pesach. You have to have
Yeah.
Pesach in the spring, and
But
that's why
when
we
does it
always have.
show up? If you're off a month every 3 years, then you can see how the harvests, they're coming out when they're supposed to come out. Your calendar's not going to match.
So you gotta
Does it
have a
work?
Adar. You have
Marion, what?
too.
Leap year,
Have a
double
dar
leap.
too.
They add another
Right. Oh,
Adar.
you're so gifted and talented. Everybody's ahead of me. Okay. So I love it. Thank you. Yeah, well, let's fill in another month. That will make the adjustment. So every 3 years, we have a leap year. Okay. Solar calendar has it when?
4 years.
4
4
years.
Every 4 years.
4 years.
4
And
years.
we run the cycle.
Isn't it 7 times in 19 years?
Thank you. All
Yes,
right.
I'm gonna get
It's not
very,
every 3 years. That's what I was saying.
I'm gonna get very detailed about that in a
Okay, I was
couple
gonna
of
say
minutes.
it's a certain.
All
I
right.
thought it was-
That's great. Julia, you
I
can
have
talk
a
about
question. I have
So-
a question.
Go ahead, Sally.
Can you explain codify?
it. Just means you set down something and that's it. It doesn't change.
So who was these people that were codifying?
Rabbis.
No,
Rabbis.
Sages. Some rabbis that wanted to get into the Mishnah. They wanted
you
their
go.
names remembered.
Well, I think about
All
the
they wanted to get into.
I think about the energy and time that all of it took until the calendar, until it was codified. It's like how much time, now they had to find something else to do with all of that time that they used to confirm all of this. What are these
Right.
70 people going to do now?
They can go on Zoom and take a class. Okay. So, all right.
Lunar
All right,
time.
Julia, you're going to talk about, we didn't quite plan this. Okay. Julia, you're going to talk about the 7 times and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah.
All right. You start talking and then I'll pick up anything you don't mention.
Okay, Marlene, did you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't know if we were abandoning lunar time. From a woman's point of view, did the women look to the lunar cycles, for their own menstrual cycles? You know what I mean? In terms of like fertility or in terms of just the moon and when they were cycling, when they would have the red tent or whatever. Did women use the moon for that?
That was a very big part of it. And certainly when they were doing anything related to fertility and the use of the mikvah and so forth, they were very much counting days and trying to establish. And it was a very difficult situation from when women had fertility issues and couldn't quite, it might have a cycle of 23 days or 38 days, whatever it is. It was a very difficult thing. So one of the early names for periods was monthlies. And just everybody was assumed to be on a 28-day cycle. Well, I don't know about you, okay? It was not 28 days for everybody, okay? So, all right, Julia, your
And
turn.
then I will just add into that
There we go.
Rosh Chodesh, well, a couple of things about Rosh Chodesh. Why do you announce it? They announce it at Shabbat services the week before, or the Shabbat before the new month. Why do you do that?
So we'll know when it is.
Well, sometimes Rosh
But
Chodesh,
why?
sometimes it occurs before the next Shabbat. So
Right,
you
it
have
occurs,
to know.
but then what? There are specific prayers that you're saying on Rosh Chodesh. And if you don't know that it's Rosh Chodesh and you do those prayers, you will have missed it. So they announce it.
You have to
before
know
you-
ahead of time when it'll be.
You have to know ahead of time.
Isn't Rosh Chodesh a woman's holiday? So it's the woman supposed to get ready for her holiday?
Why is that? Why is it a women's holiday? Why is it known as a women's holiday?
Carol had her hand up. Carol?
No, I was just gonna say that Rosh Chodesh, it was another time for everybody to gather in the center of town to read Torah.
Right. You're reading Torah, you Hallel on Rosh Chodesh.
Right.
Why wasn't
And-
it considered a women's holiday? We haven't
And-
talked about that.
One of the things I had learned, there's a couple, but is that during the time when the golden calf, the women refused to give their gold and silver for the golden calf. So God gave them the holiday of Rosh Chodesh, that they wouldn't have to work on that day. And that was their holiday.
They could
Okay,
dance.
good.
They could dance and meet the young men and whatever in the villages.
Rosh Chodesh and during the Hanukkah candles, while the Hanukkah candles are burning, no work. Women didn't
Right.
have to work. Get those tall candles. Okay, so
Now, what is the deal about, I heard you're supposed to wait, or maybe this is just about 3 days before you actually say it, and ideally, you wait 7 days or the next Shabbos ending afterwards. What is that about?
For what?
Before what?
Before you say the, what is it, the Kaddish Levanah?
I don't know. I'm not sure what you're asking.
The ceremony that you do after the start of Rosh Chodesh, when you're out there with the moon and you say the different things.
Anybody know?
I don't know.
That's Orthodox men. Sometimes they'll go in a group outside and they'll pray to the.
We have it on our conservative Siddur, so I
All right. Well, you know what? We will look it up, but if you can find something, that would be great.
Okay.
Look it up for next time. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. All right. Because this is a, collaborative effort here. So thank you. We'll do our part of it. Thank you. Okay.
So we talked about now the beginning of this codification in order to keep our harvest festivals at the right time. If you look at the Muslim calendar and Ramadan, they don't add that leap month in. So sometimes Ramadan's in the middle of summer. Those are really long fast days in the middle of summer. Sometimes it's in the middle of winter.
Oh, okay.
And it floats, it moves around because they don't have a leap month to fix the holidays. In their, in the Torah, it says at their appointed times and seasons. So this was very important. So we talked about the leap year 7 times in a 19-year cycle. So, and when they add in, we also talked about the Adar. They added an extra Adar. So you hear Adar 1 and Adar 2. Adar 1 is the leap month that they're adding in. Then you have, or Adar Rishon for first, it's also called. But then you have Adar 2, which is where Purim is. So when you have a leap year, Purim is in Adar 2, so that it's still 1 month from Pesach, the next month. You couldn't insert the leap month in between, then you'd have too long between the holidays. So how do you know if it's going to be a leap year? I just found this fascinating. I don't know, because I like the numbers. So if you take the Hebrew year, and so what Hebrew year are we in now?
5780.
5781.
5781.
Yeah.
And you divide it by 19 to go back to your math. You want to see where you are in the 19-year cycle. You divide the current Hebrew year by 19 and you look at the remainder. Remember remainders from your long division?
3.
It doesn't go, so 5781 divided by 19 doesn't go evenly. There's a remainder of 5 this year.
Yeah.
There are certain years of the 19-year cycle that are always the leap years. And it's long. It's the 3rd year, 6th year, 8th year, 11, 14, 17, and 19. So the remainder's 5, not one of those numbers. Next year, the remainder will be 6. So next year should be a leap year. And I'm going to share the screen here. If any of you have a musical background,
yeah.
The years, those 3, 6, 11, they make a major scale. I know this might be kind of esoteric, but if you look, there's always 2 years plus the leap year between a whole note, like C and D. And then there's only 1 year plus the leap year in a half note on the scale. So I don't know, just something, you know, if you play or if you know music theory, it's a way to remember it. But I think that's really kind of interesting. Then there's another problem too with the calendar, and that's fast days like Yom Kippur. If you have a fast day, you can't have a Shabbat the day before the fast, because you wouldn't be able to prepare your food either before the fast or after the fast. So Yom Kippur can't be on a Friday or a Sunday, right? And we already said Yom Kippur is 10 days after Rosh Hashanah. So that means that Rosh Hashanah can't be certain days. In fact, there are only 4 days that Rosh Hashanah can be. It can be on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday. You have 4 days for Rosh Hashanah. Otherwise, Yom Kippur will fall on the wrong day. Well, how do you make sure that Rosh Hashanah falls on one of those 2 days? The months are either 29 or 30 days. Sometimes you have 1 day of Rosh Chodesh, sometimes you have 2 days. But there are 2 months where they can borrow a day. So this, and do we want to pull up that worksheet? Do you guys have the worksheet, the handouts that I sent out?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at the one with the months on it, which is, I can pull it up, 3-5. It's a big chart that looks like this.
Yeah.
So there are 2 months, Cheshvan, which we just finished, and Kislev, which we're in now. So they take a day from one of those 2 months. They either add a day to Cheshvan or take away from Kislev and the year before. So all the way ahead to next Rosh Hashanah, we can see what day it will be, because they've borrowed a day or added a day to those months. And now, and all of this you can find in your trusty Hebrew calendar, your Women's League calendar diary. See, everybody's holding them up there.
Yeah.
But not just your virtual, not just for this year. You can look at the word for calendar. Anyone know?
Luach.
It's a luach.
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
Siri
luach.
didn't get it either. It just hit it on my phone. A luach. You can look, years ahead in your luach or now online on Google when your holidays are going to be, and how it's amazing that they could figure this all out back then.
Okay. Any
You
other
said
last
that,
questions?
yeah, I have one. You said that Yom Kippur cannot be on a Friday. Why? You could cook Thursday.
Right, but then you have to break the fast.
Shabbat.
And then it would be Shabbat after the fast.
Thank you.
You have no way to prepare for Shabbat because Yom Kippur, it's all back to the women in the preparation. Okay. So, it sounds like a joke, but it's really the truth, because you have no way. Just think of the logic. How do you prepare to feed the family or whoever
And if-
You know, if you have a Shabbat before, right before, you can't because you're not supposed to do work. And then you have it after. How do you honor the Shabbat and all the expectations of what you need to do for Shabbat if you've got Yom Kippur, which is a fast day, right before? Okay. And just even having the other holidays, it's very tricky. Rosh Hashanah, 2 days, right? You know, and where do you fit this in and fit in Shabbat? And it has to make sense as far as honoring each one in its respective place.
I've heard this before, but can you repeat the 4 days that Yom Kippur can only be?
No, Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah.
Monday, and you see, it's a Monday, Tuesday. You know, it can be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday. Sometimes you have Rosh Hashanah Saturday, Sunday, and then Yom Kippur is the Monday.
This year it happened that way.
Yeah.
Why can't you have it on Wednesday?
Because then Yom Kippur is on
Friday.
Yom Kippur is
the next week it becomes
determined on Yom Kippur. Okay, got it.
Okay. It just takes a little bit of thinking, but then it makes sense when you think about what it is that's preventing you from doing. You know, it's work related and you don't want to be doing work on certain days, and it's implied, you know, that you have to prepare for these things and you don't allow yourself that time. That's all it is. It's not that complex.
They didn't have
Tisha B'Av can never be on Shabbos.
Okay.
The only fast day you can have on Shabbos is Yom Kippur.
And it's called Shabbat of Shabbatot, Yom Kippur. So they're very, very aware of that. Okay. All right.
So Rosh Chodesh, we have, Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month every year, but we don't think about Rosh Hashanah as Rosh Chodesh, but it's really Rosh Chodesh Tishrei.
Right.
We just call it Rosh Hashanah instead.
And, you know, part of that codification too, originally, the first month of the calendar was not Tishrei. It was Nisan. It was Nisan, the month in which Passover came. But it got very tricky, and there were a lot of reasons why it had to be switched. And we're not going to go into it now. But when the whole thing was codified in the 4th century, that was one of the changes. That Tishrei became the first month, which made sense because it's Rosh Hashanah is in Tishrei. And it's the beginning, I mean, thematically, okay? It fits in with that idea of new beginnings, new year, literally and figuratively for the holiday, okay?
It's the ultimate performance review.
All right. I think we need to probably go into watching the time, go into the breakout groups for, you know, about 10 minutes. What do you think?
Okay. I set it for 15.
Okay, so set it for 15. So let's just, because we don't want this to go too late. And
just before we break up into smaller groups, I want to introduce Anita, who is joining us for the first time on the recommendation of her sister, Sabina. They disappeared off my screen here. And also Jen Wood, who hasn't been able to make earlier classes, but is here today. So if they're in your breakout rooms, say hi to them. And I'm gonna go ahead and open the rooms. Debbie and Ellen and I are going to moderate them, and we'll take questions, and we're going to go over that worksheet on that says gematria.
Yeah.
If I can get the number. So it's 3, 4.
And then
Julia?
after,
yes.
I don't know which breakout room I'm in.
Nobody knows.
No one knows. You'll automatically disappear into one as soon as I hit the button. And we'll have about 15.
Thank you.
Okay. Not to worry. We've got that. Then you come back after the 15 minutes. We'll go over the homework for next time. Next time, by the way, is only 2 weeks from tonight. So you don't have the luxury of the time you had this time. It'll be okay. And then we will very quickly do the beginning of the Kaddish D'Rabbanan, because we'll go through each time, adding another part to it so that ultimately you'll know this one as fluently as you need to. Okay?
Okay,
All right.
I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Zoom teaching is a very different experience. So
It certainly is, and counseling is very difficult too.
very good experience.
Yes.
Okay, we'll just wait
right now.
We'll wait till everybody.
The months we didn't do.
Well, that was perfect timing for my group. Right there, right to the end.
Ellen and Julia, there was a request to have the answers for the gematria given next, when you send out the new homework, because I didn't really have a way to write it up there.
Okay.
And for some of us, it's been at least 55 years since we wrote this stuff.
Yep.
At least.
Right, and I mentioned in our group too that if you don't know the letters like log, if you don't know the sounds that they make, you don't know the Hebrew letters at all, we have a beginner Hebrew class to learn the alphabet.
Yeah, and lots of people that want to take it. We have a wait list. We're now getting ready to plan the second set. So this is the time, if you want the review, we're making.
Do you know when that will be?
That's for the beginners?
Can you send that out?
It will start in February, and there'll be all kinds of publicity in week and all of that.
And
Will there be a
different
Hebrew
levels?
review class for people who don't want to do the alphabet but that aren't super?
We have, this has been really well received. So we have a meeting. We're figuring out what we have for next time. Just
Okay.
sign up early. Don't wait. Okay.
So how do you do that? How do you sign up in February?
You'll see. Just
Okay.
relax. You'll see.
So then I can be.
Happening for 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
So will you give us a list of something to fill in or apply?
Yes,
Or?
we'll send that out.
Okay.
We'll send. how
Can
to fill
we
it out.
do the?
All right.
Gail,
answers
Gail,
for the Can we do the answers for the Hebrew calendar? Just want to make sure if I did it right or not.
I can go through them quickly if you guys
Okay.
are willing to stay on for a minute.
Yeah, okay.
The 33rd day of the Omer is log.
We did that. We did that. The next page.
What's the next page? Oh,
The Hebrew.
2 pages.
The second, like,
the
we
source.
got a little confused because we couldn't figure out.
And that's why we didn't do that page.
I thought
Why
we were all
don't
gonna do
you
it,
send it? Why don't you
yeah.
send it to everyone?
Yeah, we made a decision. Exactly.
Sorry about that, Debbie. Yeah,
Because
we
it was
asked the
very
rabbi about those,
confusing.
and she thought it was too confusing.
Yeah,
too.
well, I looked at it and we went, no way. And so we apologize. We're following a curriculum here and we're,
okay.
shaping it as we see fit. That one is not ever going to be dealt with again. So,
There was no second page. We're not talking, there's no second page.
So relax.
Okay.
You all get A's.
What-
Okay.
Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about this one?
29.
Yes.
Yes.
The sources for that's the one that we're talking about that we weren't going to use. Sorry, Debbie.
There's a couple of things we couldn't figure out exactly.
And you know what? They were confusing. Just to explain why I think it was so confusing. Remember we talked about Tishrei shifting?
Yeah.
And sometimes being the 7th month, sometimes being the 1st month, and
But-
these months, the same thing.
But they were saying Ziv was Nissan.
They kept changing in the middle. They were not
They
consecutive,
kept
which
changing.
is why it was confusing. So do not even waste any time on it.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
because I thought it was ER. Is that not right? Second
All
month
right,
is
let's
ER?
take care of the homework. If
Okay.
you've got any questions, we'll deal with it after,
Okay.
start getting
Okay.
on. Julia?
Sorry.
I actually didn't have it in front of me. So for the next class, here, let me grab it, is when you will need the book that we told you about in the beginning, the Reuben Hammer. And the
It's 55, I think.
Will you send it to us?
Yes.
the homework?
Yes.
Yes, it's reading.
Oh, yes.
It's reading, and it's really it's interesting. It's reading a chapter in the book. That's what this is. Okay. So it's only 2 weeks this time, and it's reading.
Why is that?
Because we didn't want to run into Hanukkah. We didn't want to do it during Hanukkah. We thought you would
time.
So were we supposed to buy that book?
Buy it, or in some way get hold of it.
Oh, I don't know what that book is again. Could you?
It's called Entering Jewish Prayer by Reuven Hammer.
It was about $16 on Amazon.
Amazon.
And it came very quickly.
And it's the chapter you'll need to read is chapter 5, which is the creation of the Siddur. And it's
who is it by again? Reuben who?
Hammer.
Hammer?
Hammer.
Hammer.
Okay.
That's part of my surname.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
It's up there.
Right. So chapter 5, creation of the Siddur, it's about, let's see, 75 to 99. So about 25 pages in little paperback here. So
Julia and Ellen, I just had a random thought. In doing the lesson in Gematria and stuff with our name, maybe people might, if they know their Hebrew names, they might want to put their Hebrew name on their little square, you know?
Okay.
I mean, I don't think we have the letters on our English computers to put it in Hebrew, but we can, write it out phonetically.
Okay. As long as we can, we know your English names, and we're still learning. So can we wait a little bit on that? On the Hebrew names? Just
of course.
I have to tell you, I don't know how to change my name in the square.
Right. Okay. I'll change it on the square.
Right next to the dots, there's mute, and then it says you can do the other dot, bring it down, it says change name.
Okay, you know what? Could you?
I'll figure it out.
And after everybody starts to get off, let's just take care of the homework here first. What I would also ask is, if you have a camera on your computer, there are a couple of you who have names only, and we really would love to see faces. So for those of you who, thank you, you're all so beautiful. Okay.
I know, and we know some of you were on too.
Just however you're dressed, it's okay. All right. Thank you, gorgeous.
And we don't mind if you're eating or
right.
It's a long evening in different time zones. So
all right. We're not looking for waxing, we're not looking for pedicures, we're not looking for anything. We are friends.
Just eyebrows.
Okay, eyebrows. All right, it's fine. This is not 8th grade. All right. We're beyond. We're kind, and so forth. At any rate, okay, everybody's got the homework. Let's go to Kaddish D'Rabbanan.
So what's the date of the next one? Okay.
December 3rd.
Night, December
3rd.
I got it marked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because this is long, this prayer, and it's in Aramaic, this version that I'm sharing here, it's also, you can find it in your Siddur, and we sent out handouts for it too. If you look at the translation, I don't have the translation here, but it won't be exactly what the words are if you can recognize words in the Hebrew. It's like poetry. It's not a literal translation if you're looking at your translation. But we're going to start with the first paragraph today, and we'll keep adding on so that people are familiar with saying it. And I'm actually, I can't mute everyone while I'm sharing this.
Okay, we can mute ourselves.
All together, and Ellen will lead us off on this paragraph, and we'll add on. And also, if you feel like you want to lead one of these two prayers in the next couple of classes, just shoot us an email, and we can add you to the list too. Right. And you guys can lead these two.
Actually, if there's somebody else, Debbie, do you want to read that first part of the Kaddish
Sure.
there?
All right, do you want to point to the words or should I just read it?
Sure, I will point.
Okay.
If everybody can mute otherwise, or, because we do want you to say this and practice saying it, but it's not like a mourner's Kaddish where we need the response, and so we'll just avoid the cacophony this time.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah be'alma di vra chirute ve'amlich malchute ve'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen.
And then just the next lines too.
Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mivorach Leolam Ulamei Almayam.
Thank you.
It really, so far, looks like the mourner's Kaddish. Okay, so this part, is absolutely the same. It changes though as we go on.
I did see one difference.
What is the difference, Deb?
Instead of it normally when we do it during Psalms, it's kirute. Here it is chirute. And I grew up thinking it was always a chaf. But everything I'm seeing now is a kaf. And I've had to retrain myself to say kirute, but here it's a chaf, chirute.
Okay. I have to check that, but thank you. All right. Start practicing. Those of you who've been saying the mourner's Kaddish, you're all set so far. It gets a little bit tricky on, as we go on, but just keep practicing and you'll get used to doing the la'asot bracha at the beginning and this at the end, and we'll keep adding to it. All right. So just, if you want to go in the next paragraph, make sure, you're reading it fluently or smoothly or faster than you have been reading it, always working to up the goals and so forth. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. If you have any specific questions,
I thought, I looked at the homework. I tried to find the YouTube link for Mishnah Berchat, chapter 1. I came up with something, chapter 6, I put in Women's League. I searched all over. And then I listened to Debbie Friedman, the Kaddish Rabbanan, but I didn't get a text print. Did I do something wrong? Because I didn't get anything that required a passcode.
So,
go ahead, Julia.
So they're all fixed now on the Women's League website. The problem was it was stored on Zoom. The rabbi had recorded it, and then Zoom doesn't keep things forever. That's why it asked for the passcode. Now, if you go and look on the Women's League, website, you have to log in. If you have not logged in, some people asked about this. Email Razel Kessler, Kessler at WLCJ.org, and she will help you with a login and a password for the website. Once you log in and you go to download member materials, and then you scroll down to Bat Mitzvah, all these classes are recorded. So if you miss one, you can watch it there. And the homework was there. There was the text, it's called handouts, Kaddish Rabbanan video and handouts. I think that's what it's called there now.
Julia?
Yes.
I have a question. So will you send out the homework or Razel will?
It'll all come from us, from me.
It'll always be from us.
I have a question. I'm looking in the Sidur Sim Shalom, and instead of chirute, there's a dagesh, and it's kirute. That's
what Debbie was saying.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Debbie was saying.
I thought she was saying the opposite.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, Julia?
Yes.
We write to Razel for the conservative women's login and password?
To get onto the WLCJ.org website. Thank you, everybody.